Good evening, Africa. Good evening, world. This is Talk for Africa 3-6, so the voice of truth, the voice of resistance, and the voice of a new dawn for our beloved continent. Tonight, I bring you a story that is shaking the very foundations of global trade, a story that is sending shockwaves from Washington to Brussels, from Paris to the dusty fields of the American Midwest. What happens when two nations, one in the heart of Africa and one in the beating heart of South America, come together and decide to write history on their own terms? What happens when Burkina Faso, a nation once dismissed as small and powerless, dares to stand shoulder to shoulder with Brazil and carve out a 25 billion agricultural empire without asking permission from the so-called superpowers? What happens is exactly what the West feared most: liberation, defiance, and the rise of a new world order. Let us be clear, this is not just about soybeans. This is not just about crops, contracts, or exports. This is about power. For decades, the United States claimed the throne of global agriculture, exporting soybeans by the millions of tons and flooding markets while dictating the prices. But now they are furious. Their farmers are angry. Their monopoly is collapsing. Why? Because Africa, through Burkina Faso, has found its voice. Imagine this: fields across West Africa buzzing with tractors, silos filled with golden harvests, ships carrying millions of tons of soybeans across the Atlantic, not to America, not to Europe, but to a partner nation that respects us, Brazil. Imagine farmers in Burkina Faso who once struggled to afford seeds now becoming part of a global 25 billion trade. Imagine entire villages transformed, children going to school because their parents' farms are finally valued, hospitals being built from soybean revenue, industries rising from the soil of Africa itself. The West is not just shocked, they are terrified. Because if one African nation can do this, then what stops others from following? What happens when Niger, Mali, Ghana, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and beyond decide that the days of exploitation are over? What happens when the African continent decides that trade must be fair, partnerships must be equal, and our wealth must serve us first? This, my brothers and sisters, is more than a deal. It is a revolution disguised as agriculture. A $25 billion soybean revolution that has exposed the fragility of Western dominance. The United States thought they had time. They thought Africa would remain dependent forever. But today they woke up to a nightmare. Africa no longer waiting. Africa no longer begging. Africa no longer silent. And tonight, on Talk for Africa 3-6, so we break it all down. How this deal came to be. Why Brazil chose Burkina Faso. Why U.S. farmers are in panic. And most importantly, what this means for Africa's destiny. Stay with us, because the story you are about to hear is not just history, it is the future. The African future. Brothers and sisters of Africa, citizens of the world, today we are gathered to witness a thunderclap in the global economy, a moment so decisive that it will echo through every boardroom in Washington, every farmland in Iowa, every trading hall in New York, and every African village where hope is rising like the morning sun. The world woke up to a headline that shook the very foundation of Western dominance. Brazil and Burkina Faso have signed a 25 billion soybean deal, one of the largest agricultural agreements in modern history. And with this deal, the mask of Western monopoly has been ripped away. Let us pause and understand what this means. For decades, the United States has treated soybeans as a weapon of control, not just as a crop. From their fields in the Midwest, they projected influence into Latin America, into Africa, and into Asia. They forced nations to buy their genetically modified seeds. They dictated global market prices. They used food as leverage for politics. Farmers in America believed they had a permanent grip on the soybean trade. They thought the world had no alternative but to bow before them. But today they are furious because Burkina Faso, under the courageous leadership of President Ibrahim, has broken the chains of dependency and charted a new path with Brazil, a fellow nation of the global South. This $25 billion agreement is not merely about soybeans, it is about sovereignty. It is about two nations from continents that were colonized, robbed, and marginalized standing together and saying, enough. It is about the South uniting with the South, refusing to be pawns in the chess game of Western powers. Brazil, with its vast farmlands and agricultural technology, brings the supply. Burkina Faso, with its strategic vision and growing demand for food security and agro-industrial development, brings the partnership. Together, they bypass the West. Together, they cut the strings of manipulation. Together, they send a shockwave that makes us farmers tremble with rage. Why a rage? Because they see billions slipping away. They see that their era of dictating who eats and who starves is ending. They see that African nations are no longer lining up to buy their overpriced, over-controlled, genetically modified soy. They see their carefully crafted monopoly cracking open like dry soil under the African sun. But my brothers and sisters, let us not make the mistake of thinking this is just about money. No, it is about dignity. For years, Africa has been told what it can and cannot grow. Aid organizations arrived with conditions. Take this seed, sign this contract, obey these rules. Multinationals dictated whether African farmers could save their seeds or must buy them again each season. But now, Burkina Faso is declaring, we will decide what we grow, what we trade, and with whom we partner. Imagine the picture, a landlocked African nation, often mocked by the West as too poor, too small, too dependent, now sitting at the table of billion-dollar negotiations and walking away with one of the most significant agricultural trade victories of our time. This is more than a deal, it is a revolution of self-determination, a revolution of South-South cooperation, a revolution of agricultural justice. The fury of us farmers is not born out of simple economics. It is born out of fear. They fear that if Burkina Faso can do this, other African nations will follow. They fear that the monopoly they held for half a century will collapse. They fear a domino effect. Mali, Niger, Senegal, and even Ethiopia turning to Brazil, to India, to China, and to each other for trade, leaving the American farmer shouting into the empty skies of the Midwest, his soybeans unsold, his warehouses overflowing, his grip on global food politics broken forever. And what of the American politicians? Who used food as a weapon? What of the lobbyists who controlled the Senate with soybean dollars? What of the corporations that used African hunger as their business model? They too are furious, for they see that Africa is no longer a passive consumer, it is an active player, a negotiator, a partner on equal terms. Brothers and sisters, this is not just Burkina Faso's victory, it is Africa's victory. It tells the farmer in Ghana who has struggled under unfair contracts that there is another way. It tells the cotton grower in Mali that he need not forever be enslaved to Western buyers. It tells the rice farmer in Nigeria that South-South trade is the future. This $25 billion soybean deal is a thunderclap of independence, a declaration of unity, a blueprint for the future, and make no mistake, the world is watching. In Beijing, they are watching. In Moscow, they are watching. In Delhi, they are watching. And in Washington, they are panicking. The fury of us farmers is not the end of this story, it is just the beginning. For every seed planted in Burkina Faso's soil through this deal is a seed of resistance, a seed of partnership, a seed of liberation. And so tonight, as we begin this discussion, let the world hear the truth loud and clear. Africa is no longer the pawn of Western agriculture. With Brazil by our side, with courage in our hearts, with vision in our leadership, we are taking back the fields, the markets, and the power that is rightfully ours. The lesson of this deal is clear. Power respects power. For too long, the world told us that we must wait for aid, that we must beg for loans, that we must accept whatever crumbs fall from the table of the West. But today, Burkina Faso has shown that we can negotiate not as beggars, but as equals. Brazil has shown that solidarity can triumph over selfishness. And the fury of U.S. farmers has shown that the old system trembles when Africa rises. Inside Burkina Faso, this deal will transform lives. Villages once forgotten will be connected by new roads. Farmers once strapped in cycles of poverty will see their crops valued in billions. Processing plants will rise, turning raw soybeans into oil, flour, feed, and countless other products. Schools will be built, scholarships funded, and research centers established to ensure that African knowledge, not imported consultants, guides our future. This is not charity. This is sovereignty. In Brazil, this deal is not simply about trade. It is about forging a bond between two peoples who understand what it means to be exploited and to rise again. Brazil and Burkina Faso have opened a door that others will soon walk through. A door where the Global South trades with the Global South, not through Western intermediaries, but directly, proudly, powerfully. And Africa is watching. From Dakar to Dar es Salaam, from Cape Town to Cairo, leaders and farmers alike are asking, if Burkina Faso can do this, why not us? And the answer is simple. Nothing stops us but fear. And today, Burkina Faso has burned fear to ashes. Yes, retaliation will come. Washington will grumble, Brussels will frown, Paris will whisper. But what can they do when the tide of history shifts? They can no more stop this transformation than they can stop the sun from rising. They can scream, they can sanction, they can scheme, but Africa will march forward. So let me speak directly, not just to Burkina Faso, not just to Brazil, but to the entire African continent. This is not the time for hesitation. This is not the time for small dreams. This is the time for boldness. If one nation can secure $25 billion, what can 10 nations secure? What can 54 nations secure if they negotiate as one? Imagine a continental agricultural pact where Africa sets its own prices, where Africa decides its own partners, where Africa ensures its own food sovereignty. To the farmers of America who are furious, I say this: your anger is not our concern. For decades, you profited while we starved. You exported while we imported. You grew fat while we were left thin. Today, the balance shifts. Today, the child you ignored has grown into an adult who will no longer eat scraps. Do not be furious, be humbled. For the future belongs not to those who exploit, but to those who build, and to Europe, I say, your fear is justified. The age of monopoly is over. The age of dictating terms is finished. You may call us reckless, but the truth is, we are simply free. We will choose our partners, we will shape our destiny, and we will not ask for your permission. This deal, my brothers and sisters, is more than $25 billion. It is more than soybeans. It is a declaration that Africa is awake. It is a sign that Africa's heart beats strong, that Africa's voice will be heard, that Africa's hands will shape its future. So let the world be furious. Let them whisper, let them threaten, let them rage. Their fury is proof of our success. Their anger is proof of our progress. Their trembling is proof that we have struck the chains that once bound us. And now, as we close, let us stand together and declare, never again will Africa be a dumping ground for unwanted goods. Never again will we sell our resources for pennies while others profit in trillions. Never again will we wait for permission to rise. From this day forward, Africa is not a follower. Africa is a leader, and Burkina Faso has lit the torch. To the farmers in the fields, to the leaders in their offices, to the youth who dream of a future where Africa stands proud, I say, the moment is here. The revolution is now. The future is ours. Let us seize it boldly, without fear, without apology. Because when Africa rises, the world changes. And today, thanks to Burkina Faso and Brazil, the world has already begun to change. Brothers and sisters, let us dive deeper into the meaning of this moment. For too long, the Western world, especially the United States, believed that food was their eternal weapon. They told themselves, if Africa needs soy, it will buy from us. If Brazil produces, it will export through us. If Asia consumes, it will be under our rules. But today, that myth has been shattered. Brazil and Burkina Faso have rewritten the script. They have reminded the world that trade is not the property of Washington or Brussels. Trade belongs to those who produce with honesty, those who consume with dignity, and those who negotiate with courage. But why soybeans? Why is this single crop creating such a storm in Washington? Because soybeans are not just beans. They are the heart of a trillion-dollar global economy. They feed animals that supply the world with meat. They are crushed into oil that fuels industries and kitchens. They are turned into protein that feeds nations. Whoever controls soy controls food security. Whoever controls soy controls the politics of hunger. And for decades, America wielded that power like a whip. When nations resisted their policies, they tightened exports. When African nations begged for fairer terms, they imposed higher prices. When Latin America grew restless, they interfered politically. But now, a nation of less than 23 million people, Burkina Faso, has dared to say, no more. We will not bow. We will choose partners who respect us. Think about the symbolism. Brazil, a country of immense agricultural power, standing shoulder to shoulder with an African nation often dismissed as small or poor. The message is clear: partnership is not about size. Partnership is about respect. Partnership is about a shared history of resistance to colonial arrogance. Partnership is about vision for a new order. Do you hear the panic in the halls of Washington? Do you hear the whispers in Brussels? They are asking themselves, if Burkina Faso can strike such a deal, who is next? What if Ghana partners with Argentina? What if Ethiopia partners with India? What if Africa builds its own agro-industry free from Western patents, free from GMO control, free from manipulation? Ladies and gentlemen, this $25 billion deal is like the opening of a dam. For too long, Africa has been sitting at the bottom, watching the flow of global trade pass over its head. But today, the gates are opening, and the waters of opportunity are rushing into Africa's fields. This is more than trade, this is liberation, and let us speak of President Ibrahim, the man at the center of this wave. When the West looks at him, they see a young soldier, a man they underestimated, a leader they dismissed as temporary. But today, they see something they never expected. A statesman who outmaneuvered the most powerful agricultural lobby in the world with one signature, delivered a blow to America's soybean empire that no African leader before him dared to strike. Make no mistake, this deal was not born overnight. For months, Western diplomats whispered in Ouagadougou, offering promises, threatening consequences, trying to sabotage negotiations. They told that aligning with Brazil would isolate Burkina Faso. They told him the West would cut off aid. They told him there would be retaliation, but did not flinch. He knew that a future built on Western aid is a future of slavery. He chose sovereignty over subservience. He chose dignity over fear. And today his courage has borne fruit. Now let us consider Brazil's role. Brazil is not just another exporter, it is the giant of the South. For decades, Brazil itself was under America's shadow, exporting raw goods while importing dependency. But today, Brazil has grown into an agricultural powerhouse that no longer asks for permission. By partnering with Burkina Faso, Brazil has sent a loud message to the global South. We can trade with each other. We do not need Western intermediaries. We can build a South-South economy that rivals the North. Imagine the transformation this brings. For Burkina Faso, $25 billion is not just a number, it is a revolution in the making. That money will build silos, processing plants, transportation networks. It will finance research so African scientists can create seeds adapted to African soil. It will empower farmers who for too long were left behind by global markets. It will bring jobs, schools, and infrastructure. It will lift millions from poverty. And let us not forget the anger of us farmers is proof of success. They are not furious because of charity. They are furious because they see their market shrinking. They are furious because the monopoly they built with subsidies and manipulation is collapsing. They are furious because for the first time in modern history, Africa is not a victim in the trade war, it is a victor. Let me paint you the picture. In Iowa, farmers gather in community halls, looking at unsold soybeans stacked high, their profits disappearing. In Washington, lobbyists crowd the offices of senators, demanding that America retaliate against Burkina Faso and Brazil. In European capitals, analysts whisper that if Africa breaks free in agriculture, Europe's grip on medical devices, on energy, on technology could be next. The fury of American farmers is the trembling of an empire that feels the ground shifting beneath its feet. But the story is not only about them, it is about us Africans, Brazilians, people of the global South. It is about what we choose to do with this moment. This deal is a spark. Will we fan it into a fire that lights the path of independence for all Africa? Or will we let Western fear-mongering smother it? I say we fan the fire. I say we rise. I say we turn this $25 billion into the seed of a new global order. For years, the West told us that Africa was incapable of negotiating billion-dollar agreements without them. They told us we were too divided, too poor, too dependent. But today, Burkina Faso stands as living proof that those lies are crumbling. Today, Burkina Faso says to every African nation, if we can do it, so can you. And so, my brothers and sisters, as we continue this journey, let us keep one truth in our hearts. This deal is not the end, it is the beginning. It is the beginning of a new agricultural revolution. It is the beginning of African dignity. It is the beginning of a world where the South rises to meet the North not as a beggar, but as an equal. Let us look beyond Ouagadougou, beyond Washington, and see the global tremor this deal has created. For this is not only about soybeans, not only about Burkina Faso, not only about Brazil. This is about the very architecture of global trade and how it is being shaken to its foundations. Senators are calling emergency sessions, agricultural lobbyists are knocking on every door, and think tanks are writing reports with titles that sound more like confessions of defeat than strategies of control. They are asking, how did we lose Africa? How did a small, landlocked country outmaneuver the might of American agribusiness? The fury of U.S. farmers is not only economic, it is existential. For decades, they saw Africa as a guaranteed market, a continent that would consume whatever America produced at whatever price America demanded. But today, that illusion is broken. Soybeans that once traveled from Iowa to Lagos are now flowing from Mato Grosso to Ouagadougou. The very arteries of global commerce are being rerouted, and America's heartland feels the pain. And Europe? Oh, Europe is not silent. Brussels is worried, not just because its farmers are also losing ground, but because it sees in this deal a dangerous precedent. Africa choosing its partners freely. For centuries, Europe thrived on the illusion that Africa needed European approval for every move. But today, Africa has shown it can look across the Atlantic, not northward, but southward to Brazil, to Latin America, to partners who share its scars of colonization and its hunger for dignity. The ripple effects are already visible. In Asia, India is watching closely, calculating how it can replicate such agreements in Africa's rice, wheat, and pulse markets. In China, policymakers are smiling quietly, seeing how U.S. agricultural dominance is slipping and how a multipolar food market benefits their vision of a balanced global order. In Africa itself, capitals from Accra to Addis Ababa are whispering, if Burkina Faso can do it, why not us? This is the most dangerous question for the West, not the $25 billion loss itself, but the domino effect it may trigger. Because once Africa realizes that the chains of dependency are made not of iron but of illusion, the entire system of exploitation collapses. If Burkina Faso can secure $25 billion from Brazil, what stops Nigeria from securing $50 billion from Argentina? What stops Ethiopia from signing $30 billion deals with India? What stops the African Union from creating a continental food security pact, trading billions within Africa and the global south, leaving Western suppliers irrelevant? Let us imagine for a moment the ripple in the life of a single African farmer. In the past, his crops were ignored, undervalued, or dictated by Western aid programs. Today, with this new partnership, he stands at the center of global trade. His soybeans are no longer a footnote in America's export reports, they are a cornerstone of Africa's independence. His hands, once calloused from labor without reward, now hold the future of a continent. That is the true power of this deal. Now, let us speak of retaliation. Do you think Washington will simply watch this shift and clap politely? No, retaliation is coming. They will attempt to use sanctions, propaganda, and pressure. They will whisper about human rights violations in Burkina Faso. They will try to destabilize governments. They will fund opposition groups. They will say Brazil is irresponsible, that Africa is being exploited, that the deal is unsustainable. But do not be fooled, these are not the cries of guardians of justice. These are the cries of an empire watching its grip loosen. And here lies the test for Africa. Will we tremble under their threats? Or will we stand firm and say, your fear is not our problem. Your loss is not our shame. Your anger will not dictate our choices. I say we must stand firm. For too long, we allowed Western intimidation to shape our destiny. But today, destiny belongs to us. Consider this, the $25 billion flowing into Burkina Faso will not vanish into thin air. It will be invested in roads that connect farmers to markets, in factories that process soybeans into oil and meal, in universities that teach agronomy to the next generation. It will build a new class of African entrepreneurs who see trade not as charity but as power. This is what terrifies the West most, not just the deal itself, but the future it unlocks. The fury of U.S. farmers is the fury of a system unraveling. Imagine the scenes across the Midwest. Farmers watching television reports of African leaders shaking hands with Brazilian officials, their own silos filling with unsold grain, their profits sinking. They march to their senators demanding subsidies, demanding trade wars, demanding vengeance. But vengeance will not bring back markets, because markets follow dignity, and dignity has shifted to the south. This is the moment Africa has dreamed of for centuries. The moment when we say, we are not your consumers, we are your competitors. And in that shift, the entire psychology of global trade changes. The child has grown. The dependent has risen. The periphery has become the center. But let me be clear, this is not a war between nations. This is not about America versus Africa, or Europe versus Brazil. This is about a clash between old systems of exploitation and new systems of equality. The global south is not seeking revenge, it is seeking balance. It is saying, we will trade, but on fair terms. We will buy, but not as slaves. We will sell, but not as beggars. We are equal partners in this world, and that is why this deal is historic. It is not merely about soybeans. It is about rewriting the rules. It is about sending a message to every farmer in Burkina Faso, every worker in Brazil, every policymaker in Africa. We can shape the future without asking permission from the West.